Welcome home to St. Anne's. We want you to know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Please be sure to hit subscribe to receive our sermons. We can't wait to meet you. Now, because it's going to be one of those days. I feel like we should just assume. Well, let's talk about some really difficult things. Let's talk about baptism and the entrance into the church and all those weird, fun things that we say that we think we know, but we're not really sure we do know, and then we're embarrassed to ask. And I'll be honest, I'm really, really glad because after the service last Sunday, some of you guys, because the bishop is coming in April, so she'll be doing confirmations. It's her last visitation with this bishop before we elect our new bishop. And it was interesting because there were so many conversations after church with me about, well, I didn't know that about the apostolic succession, and I didn't know that about confirmation and all those things. And so sometimes I think we get so used to being in the church that we just think that we're supposed to know it, and then we never talk about it. Am I wrong? Because generally speaking, this congregation is pretty good about coming to me and being like, what up with whatever. But every once in a while, I think you don't. So I thought today we would talk about baptism and confirmation and open table and all those things that are really, really important to us, but we never talk about them because we just assume everybody knows. And then because we assume everybody knows, we assume we're the one person who doesn't know, and so we don't want to say anything about it. So let's talk about it. Because I think it can be one of those things where we get really mixed messages. And in the Episcopal Church, we just say, yeah. So people will come to me and they'll say, so can I get baptized? I'm like, yeah. Well, do you have to have like a certain age? Yeah. Well, can you baptize an infant? Yeah. Well, can you baptize as an adult? Yeah. What about confirmation? Do I need to sign any paperwork? No. Well, how do I become a member? You come. Well, how do I get involved? You get involved. Well, do I have to like commit to something? No. And I think it can be, people are like, wait, like I need some like rules and structure and all of that stuff. Welcome to the Episcopal Church. We ain't got that. But we invented bureaucracy. Did you know that? Yeah, we did. I know. You think the federal government did it? No, we did it first. We got that. We love a good rule. We love a good meeting. I mean, I don't, because I'm kind of the weirdo, but we love a good meeting, and we love a good bureaucracy. But when it comes to these things, it gets really complicated because people are like, well, what about communion? Can you take communion? Yeah. Well, do you have to like believe? Yeah. Well, do you need to do? No. And so we're going to talk about all these things because I think it gets really confusing. Because the baptism today is the baptism of Jesus. I don't know if you've noticed, but we've gone a few years between Christmas Eve and today. A lot has happened. Baby was born. Mary and Joseph lost the kid when he was 8. If you ever feel like you're a bad parent, which I do on a regular basis, always, I'm like, God, worst mother ever. And then I remind myself, Mary lost her son for 3 days. And I'm like, they left town. They left town. It was like Home Alone, but like religion. Yeah. And I'm like, it's fine. Okay, so he's 8. He gets left behind. He's teaching. And then like we have this huge gap. We literally don't really know within accepted scripture. If you really want some good fun times, ask me about the Gnostic Gospels, and we'll get into some other fun stories about Jesus' childhood. But accepted canonical texts We don't really know what happens between the ages of 8 and 30, but I'm going to assume it was awesome because they didn't write it down. And if you don't write it down, you know it's really good. You know, like when you call your parents from college and you leave out the good parts. You're like, finals were great, Mom. Good. Just don't ask. It was good. It was fine. So we have this huge gap because Jesus is not actually baptized until he's about 30. So he's an adult. And that's very, very adult in Judaism. Okay. So it's not like 18. Like he would have had a very full life by the time he commits to ministry and gets baptized. That's important to know because that falls under the believer's baptism. And people will cite that as information. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He probably did. Yeah. When he like read the scroll, he read it really well. Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to canonical, ooh, man, this is just going to be one of those sermons where we just answer all the questions. Are you guys ready? So like we did those question series, and it would take me like an hour for a sermon. Sorry, not sorry. That's just where we are. Okay. Canonical scriptures. When we get into the canon, it's kind of a wheeling and dealing deal. Okay. So the Gnostics, which are a sect, they love spirituality. They love dark and light. They're hardcore into that stuff. They love John. John is not a synoptic gospel, okay? John's wild, okay? It's why, like, when we read it, it's beautiful, it's poetic, but it's a little weird sometimes. And that's because the Gnostics are like, yeah, but we really, really like John. And so we're willing to give up some of these texts to get this text, okay? So there are loads of scriptural texts, loads of them. In fact, there are some missing. Someday we'll talk about Q, not important. There are loads of texts written down by people. They don't make it into our canonical Bible because there's a wheeling and dealing done to say, okay, but I really, really like Revelation, which is one revelation, one person's revelation, one person's wild revelation in dreams. Just one revelation. It is not plural. It is not revelations. Revelation. Sorry, side rant. Okay. So there are some pretty wild and fantastic gospels that don't make it in. And some of them are really good. There's like the Gospels of Mary, which are really profound and beautiful. Gospels of Thomas, the infancy Gospels of Thomas, which is kind of what we're talking about, which are wild and crazy. Think Disney's Hercules. Yeah, it's like child Jesus, according to the infancy Gospels of Thomas. So there's a lot of wheeling and dealing about how things make it into the canon. Some things do, some things don't. So within that, you get all sorts of different ways of entering into ministry or into the religious life, okay? So John the Baptist, for instance, is given to the church, given to the Jewish faith at birth, right? He has a miraculous birth. His mom is like, dang. His dad's like, dang. And they're like, here's this miraculous child. So he's raised in an ascetic religious life. He has a very, very different life than what Jesus does. Jesus has a teen mom. Jesus' mom is like the cool mom, right? We don't know really what's up with Jesus, but not given to the church as a child. Raised in the Jewish faith, very much so. Miraculous birth, all that stuff, but a very, very different life. Okay, this is important. Why is this important? Because this is why in the Episcopal Church we say both and. Yes, infant baptisms. Yes, adult baptisms. Yes, this entry into ministry. yes, you could be baptized, confirmed, whatever to receive communion, but you could also come to the table and be like, oh my God, and I need that. Because here's what we know. There are a million different entries into the religious life, okay? God has created how many different people? Don't you think God has created that many different ways to reach them? And here in the Episcopal Church, I mean, I will be honest, we don't have a whole lot of humility as clergy, but we at least have this much to say, I'm not going to question God's actions in your life. Because I know that God has acted profoundly in my life, and I know for a fact God is acting profoundly in your life. And do I look like a bouncer to God, to you? No. I'm a cheerleader. I'm like, woo, God showed up for you. Yes. So, Jesus accepts his ministry later in life, and he chooses baptism later in life. And that is important for him because as we walk this path, we'll see what baptism means for him and his commitment to his ministry and what that means for him and how that's moving forward. However, it is just as legitimate what John's experience is, which is from conception, from the time Elizabeth realizes that she is pregnant, this child is committed to God, okay? Way before he's 30 and decides, hey, I want to do this. His entire life is that way. And that's legitimate too. And for the people who have never experienced God and have never experienced church and come to church and say, I'm curious, I don't know, but I want to figure it out. I'm not even sure I believe in God. That's okay too. And if you come to this table, God's here. And God is going to sit at that table with you and share in that divine communion with you, wherever you are on it. And maybe that's your entrance into ministry in your Christian faith. I don't know what it is for you, but I know that it's there. So however that looks to you, if it's, you've never really been a church person, but you're really curious about what the church is committed to in justice and outreach, and that's your avenue in. You're like, what is up with St. Michael's Necessity Pantry? I want to be a part of that. That's cool. That's an entrance into the communion of God. Does that make sense? And how all of that counts, and that's all legitimate because it's all just an entry point. And what happens there explodes and goes wild, and you have no control over it. So yeah, I committed my children as infants. They were roughly 1 because I had to be able to fit into their baptismal dress. Whatever. It was my wedding dress, but I knew nobody would want my wedding dress, so we turned my wedding dress into the baptismal dress. It was adorable. Ask me for pictures. It's beautiful. Anyway, but they had to fit, and my kids are tiny. So it took them until they were about a year old before they actually fit. But that's fine, because that was their entrance. But that is a legitimate way to come to God. It is also a legitimate way to come to God to say, you know what, I'm not ready to make that commitment on behalf of my children. Maybe I don't want to do that. I think of it kind of as being like, I'm not going to teach my kids math until they're ready. Public education won't let me do that. Whatever, it's fine. But maybe that's not a commitment that you're willing to make, and that's okay too. And you say, you know what, I'm going to raise them in love and outreach and justice and a commitment to the grace of humanity. And if and when that speaks to them, then, we take a next step. Okay, here's the other thing that's really, really important. What is baptism? What is confirmation? What is like commitment to ministry and all those good things? There's a difference, right? Okay, this is really important because this falls under, do I have to get baptized again? No, you don't. Okay, baptism is the entrance into the Christian faith, okay? It is when we as adults or we as Christians say, you know what, God is active in this person's life and they're going to be entering into the Christian faith. It's really an entrance into the family, okay? So here at St. Anne's, baptism means that you're going to be part of the family. Though, to be honest, if you breathe around here, you're kind of a part of the family, but it's fine. We're not going to get too technical about it. But baptism, all baptism is valid, okay? Every single baptism is valid. Even if I might question the theology of another church, and I do, there are times when I'm like, are you sure? But that's fine, because that's my stuff, not their stuff. Baptism is a full entrance into the Christian faith. All of it's valid. So if you come to me and you say, yeah, I think I might have been baptized, but like I'm not really sure, that's fine. That's cool. Okay, so that's the Christian faith. What is reception, confirmation? We talked about that a little bit last Sunday because we're getting ready to do confirmations and receptions here. Confirmation is saying this denomination is the denomination that I want to commit to. So yes, in baptism, I'm a Christian, but when we get to confirmation, which tends to be a little bit later, again, usually we wouldn't confirm earlier than middle school, but people get confirmed or choose not to get confirmed all the way through their life because it is not absolutely necessary. Confirmation is necessary to be ordained. Yeah, that's it. So good talk. But that is when you decide to make that commitment. So that would be, and then people will come to me and be like, well, yeah, but I was confirmed Roman Catholic. That's cool. I was confirmed Methodist. Yeah, that's cool too. There are a few denominations. This is where we got off in left field last week about apostolic succession. There are a few denominations that follow that, like Lutheran, Roman Catholic, Orthodox, other ones that you've never even heard of, so don't worry about it, where we would say that confirmation is legitimate, that's valid. Because in confirmation, it has to be done by a bishop. Okay, I can't do that. Apostolic succession. Do we need to talk about apostolic succession again? Because I know not everybody was. Okay, all right. If you're curious about it, ask me later. So for those people, we would say a reception, because your confirmation is into the Orthodox faith, which we like to think that we're a part of. Roman Catholics, Lutherans, anyway, not the point. Anyway, so we receive those folks, okay? But again, bishops do that. And that is when you say, you know what, this is the avenue that I'm committed to. I like the way this church is doing it. This is the path, the divine path for me. And then we do that, okay? Any other question? Like, what are some other things you guys are like, yeah, but what about? Do I need to explain? Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. 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 So what we would do in that case is, because it is a commitment to that, so that would be a reception into the Episcopal Church or another confirmation. So you can be confirmed multiple times. You're like extra received. We really like Margie, so we're like, here we are again. Yeah. So confirmations and receptions, those can happen multiple times. Baptism, no. Baptism, one and done. Confirmation, reception can be multiple times. Other questions about baptism, confirmation, reception, entrance into the ministry and Christian faith? It's weird. It's complicated. And because it's weird and it's complicated because there's so many different ways to do it. The reason Scripture is complicated is because there are so many experiences of the divine. So there are so many like Acts, those stories of baptism are different than the gospel stories of baptism. You want to know why? Because they're different people and their experiences of the divine are different, and that's okay. If I asked you all what your baptism, confirmation, and entrance into ministry looked like, it's probably different. I'm going to go out on a limb. I could be wrong, but I doubt y'all have the same. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So that. So baptism, because in the Bible, like, we don't even really, up until Acts, we don't even have a concept of the Christian faith, okay? Jesus is a Jew. Did I shock anyone? Jesus is born a Jew. Jesus dies a Jew. I know. You would think the Christians were like, we invented this. No, we didn't. We didn't invent this. We just did it differently. Okay, so when you get to Acts, they're figuring out the Christian faith. But the Christian faith, up until like the 300s, is just a conglomeration of wild people trying to figure it out, okay? So in 325, are you impressed that I know it? Because we're going to say the Nicene Creed here in a minute. 325, Council of Nicaea. It's impressive. I do have a degree in this. I know you probably don't really believe me, but I do. Passed everything. Anyway, so up until then, it's just like all these kind of like quirky little groups, but there's just one kind of Christian faith, right? There's just one early church. Well, Constantine is like, y'all need to get your acts together because they're all fighting and they're punching each other and whatever. Constantine is like, get it together. And so they do the Council of Nicaea. They get in a lot of fights because, why wouldn't you? And St. Nicholas punches Athanasius. I love it. So when you think he's just like the really nice bishop who was handing out chocolate, no, he was punching heretics too. I mean, what else would you do with a heretic? Punch him. That was a joke. I don't believe that. Okay. I know. Plus, like, can you imagine me punching someone? Like, I can't even hardly stand up. Anyway, not the point. So then we have this split, okay? So we get the Eastern and the Western Church. Because at Council of Nicaea, they cannot agree on one line of the Nicene Creed. It is one line, and it's kind of a minimal line, to be perfectly honest with you. But they can't agree. So we have this divide. And we have the Roman Church, which is the Western Church, which will eventually be the Roman Catholic Church, and then all of us little splinters off of them. And then you have the Eastern Church, which would be the Orthodox Church. And they go this way. So that's really where we kind of come down into like how so baptism is into all of it. So you will not see any of that in the Bible because it just simply hadn't happened yet. There just wasn't a splintering yet in the scriptures that we have. Does that answer that question, Roel? Yeah, we invented all these other things to fight about later. But there's always something to fight about. There's always something to be divisive about. There's always something to quit about. Any other questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Again. Yeah. So this is going to be one of those both ands. Okay, so for people online or people who didn't hear the story, her daughter was baptized as an infant, and then later as an adult chose to be baptized again into another denomination, correct? Okay. And are you asking kind of what my opinion is, like what the church is, like where all that? So here's the thing. It goes back to our original. There are a million different ways to come to God. And they're all beautiful and they're all valid. Because really at the end of the day, it's about recognizing God's act in our life and committing to that ministry. So however we get there isn't wrong. It's how God gets us there. And that's what we want. And yes. That is true. Yeah. I mean, there have been a few meetings where I'm like, you realize that we don't believe that, right? I know. I come armed. I need one of the ones that has the little rapier in it where you unscrew it and shoo. That'd be great for clergy meetings, don't you think? Yeah. So I agree. Like, I think we try to overcomplicate things. We build a bureaucracy around things that don't need them. Because, yeah, we want rules and we want order, but God does not believe in rules and order. God is God. So, and we just try and catch up. Yeah. So yes, they would be completely valid. So the question was the difference between the Anglican Church and the Episcopal Church, right? Okay. So, that's a whole nother ball of wax. All right. The Anglican Communion is the world communion. The Episcopal Church is a part of that. It's the United States version of the Anglican Church, okay? But because we already established that we always like to fight about things, so there's always something to quit about, and there's always something to splinter about, there are people who said, the Episcopal Church is just too progressive. You just love people too much. And we're like, yeah, sorry about that. Things that I will never apologize for, loving people too much. My bad. Anyway, so there were people who were like, yeah, no, we want to go the more traditional route. And so they call themselves the Anglican Church in America or the United States. But they're still Episcopalians. They just left the Episcopal Church. Does that make any sense to you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so right around the time that we were saying we were going to ordain women, they were like, you can't do that. I mean, and we did. Anyway, because we make rules, God acts. And God does God's thing, and we're like, wait. And so then we caught up, and now the Anglicans in America do ordain women, but they're mad about other things that we do. Whatever. It's fine. They're still mad. It's okay. There's always something to be mad about. It's all right. I mean, I would hope it would be injustice, poverty, and disease, but, that's just me, and that's okay. Yeah, so, but confirmation would be the same. So we recognize their confirmation because their bishops are the same as our bishops. They're just bishops who have kind of gone that direction. But they were bishops in the Episcopal Church first. You don't become a bishop in the Anglican Church without being a bishop in the Episcopal Church first. Does that make sense? They just went that way. Any other questions? See, I know there are just so many things to this, right? Okay. At the end of the day, it is so incredibly complicated and so incredibly simple. And if you have other questions, come find me. I'm always up for a weird conversation about something. We want you to know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Please be sure to hit subscribe to receive our sermons. We can't wait to meet you.